Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching Big Picture with me, Vishal, Dahiya, and today we're going to talk about the Indo-Pacific region, specifically the policy which is to be adopted by the United States of America and how it will affect India's interests. In fact, recently a document has been put out which is clearly, pointing out towards United States assertions that it will, put in more robust military power in the Indo-Pacific region, and it is also pointing out towards China as having the potential to mount a challenge to a stable international order out there. So we'll try and understand all these aspects. What exactly is United States of America trying to strategize there, and how will it impact India's interests in this particular region, and how will it align with our own policy? And for more on this, we're joined by two distinguished guests. Let me first introduce them to you, beginning with Miss Elisabeth Braw. She's joining us, and she's a resident fellow, American Enterprise Institute, Washington, D.C. We also have with us Dr. Sreeram, Chaulia, foreign affairs expert. Let me begin with you, Ms. Braw, and let's first start by deconstructing this particular document and trying to understand what exactly is on the mind there on the strategists in the Biden administration when you're talking about Indo-Pacific.
Well, thank you for having me. I think what's really interesting about what's happening now in the transition from the Trump administration to the Biden administration is that actually the one remaining policy the one policy that both administrations agree on is that something needs to be done about China. And Trump did it in his own way, which was to go on the offensive and do it alone and sort of tell every other country in the world that they should just sort of join the team or otherwise be excluded. But what Biden and the Biden administration are showing now is that they want to consult allies, bring allies in, work closely with allies, which I think makes a lot of sense because the more you are working together, the more powerful you are. And that's what he's showing with his new Indo-Pacific strategy and specifically working within the Quad, which is a sort of an almost neglected group that hasn't really been mentioned very much in the past. Well, now I think as part of this Indo-Pacific strategy, we'll see a lot of focus on the Quad, and I think that is also that's something that will clearly bring India into the picture as well. So quite significant development there.
Okay, and what does the more robust military presence in Indo-Pacific might signify there?
Well, I think the U.S. armed forces and the U.S. government really learned a painful lesson from the construction of those Chinese artificial islands when it was clear to everybody what was happening, but it wasn't clear what should be done about it. And that is the challenge with lots of Chinese actions. It's not actions that are powerful or major or big enough for the U.S. to intervene, but still it's clear that something needs to be done. And so in the case of those Chinese islands, they are there now. And the U.S. is clearly, the U.S. government, the Biden administration, is clearly keen to avoid such a situation. Again, we have to remember he was vice president while all of this was happening, and the U.S. government did nothing. And so I think freedom of navigation is extremely important to the U.S. and, in fact, to every navy, and they want to make sure that that's not something that where China thinks that it can somehow just proceed on its own and nothing will happen. So all of this hangs together. So it's with regards to China, it's both about trade practices, it's about IP theft, it's about bullying, it's about artificial islands, and for that, the U.S. needs these allies, including in the maritime domain.
Okay. Let me bring in Dr. Sreeram Chaulia here as well. Dr. Chaulia, what do you make of this interim national security strategy guidance document? How would you analyze it in terms of, a specific focus there on Indo-Pacific and China, not mincing the words?
Well, Vishal, what caught my attention was that they listed 8 issue areas of concern. And out of the 8, there's one is China as a country, and all the other are topics like pandemic, climate change, terrorism, this and that. So it's so interesting that China is now a category in itself, right? So that itself shows that they see this as the main challenger or the systemic rival. So I think what's happening now is they are trying to set up a doctrinal and conceptual basis for the policies that will unfold and the actual on the ground, tactical maneuvers that will come. So it's good in that sense because they're more organized. As Elizabeth is saying, unlike Trump, it is all haywire and nobody knew really. I mean, they were talking about free and open Indo-Pacific, but then, there was no big strategy or grand strategy. But I think Biden administration's got like traditional liberal establishment. They've got like lots of, think tanks, intellectuals, all of them pushing for this. So they've got a structure in place. And I think Blinken, the US Secretary of State, has been saying that China will present the main geopolitical, challenge for 21st century. So they're in a way saying that we are now in a long haul and we are going to strategize for long-term competition and to push back. And Lloyd Austin, the US Defense Secretary, has also been saying in his confirmations and early, comments that they are going to really invest a lot in military-to-military relationships in the Indo-Pacific region.
Okay.
So I think Quad definitely, and I think Biden is saying now they're going to have a summit of Quad leaders. It has never happened. So that's a good, sign that they're taking it seriously.
Okay.
Because throughout Trump's time, they did revive the Quad, but it was only at the ministerial level. So now we're going to have a summit of prime ministers and presidents of the 4 countries, Japan, Australia, India, and the US. That's sounding very promising because that will be like really taking it to a different level in terms of signaling to the Chinese.
Definitely.
And the other thing that caught my attention was, the Quad ministerial for 2021 happened very quickly, within like a few weeks of the Biden administration coming in. So they didn't wait for it. The last Quad ministerial was in October 2020. So, and it was supposed to be an annual dialogue, but the next one came in just 4 months. So it shows that there is a sense of urgency. And what is happening is the gap is narrowing, you see, between China and the US. So I think the US will have to hit the ground running because they can't wait for 1 or 2 years and look for a reset with China. By the time, the gap will narrow even further. The Chinese are boasting, for example, 59% of US GDP was China when Trump came in 2017. Now we are already more than 70% of the US GDP. We are the major economy that has recovered faster. We are growing faster. We are, catching up and we'll overtake the US.
Okay.
So it is that kind of moment, and I think Biden administration realizes if they sleep at the wheel for another 4 years, it's gone. The global competition, what they're saying, the so-called rules-based order, liberal order, everything is going to vanish. So I think they have to realize that this is really a fight where they have to invest a lot in relationships with major countries like India, but also have a clear roadmap or a blueprint. So I see that happening. Now, of course, the test is in implementing it, but the summit of the Quad is sounding like a real game changer.
Okay. Ms. Braw, do you agree with Dr. Chaulia there in terms of the sense of urgency which seemingly can be felt in the Biden administration's action vis-a-vis, China, Indo-Pacific, and the recent decision to have a Quad summit of, the national leaders? Ms. Braw, can you hear me?
Yes. Sorry, I didn't hear you mention my name. Yes, I mean this is really, as was mentioned, it's an incredibly it's an obvious and very fast strategy that they're pursuing. As was mentioned, the Quad has been almost an afterthought. There are so many of these sort of international constructs, working groups, and so forth, and ministerial groups that exist, and they are essentially just sort of play to the galleries and don't achieve very much at all. And now all of a sudden, this Quad that seemed to be one of them is being elevated to really quite important, to a really high level of importance very quickly. And it's not as a sort of a nice gesture to the other members. It's because it's desperately needed, because here in Europe there is NATO, which works, and sort of a long formalized relationship. In the Pacific region, there is just no alliance like that. I mean, there are obviously bilateral relationships between the US and other countries, and relationships between countries there, but nothing as powerful as NATO. And it's really, if you think back to the role that NATO played vis-a-vis the West's most significant adversary during the Cold War, the Soviet Union, they had a whole alliance to do that. And now it's essentially the Biden administration, and I think we all feel that there needs to be a similar alliance to deal with China. So I think, yeah, the Quad is only 4 countries, as it says on the tin, but it's the beginning of something that could become quite significant, and it's significant in itself because of which the countries that are involved. And so I'm not saying we'll get sort of an Indo-Pacific NATO or anything like that, because the Chinese threat is not primarily about military power, even though it's that too, but it's this whole enormous package of challenges that China faces that will need to address in some sort of more formalized alliance. So yeah, as was mentioned, the Quad is quickly turning from sort of a ministerial dinner club to something much more than that.
Okay, indeed. So that's the clear, understanding out there. Dr. Chaulia, now we need to understand, and I'd like to ask you here that how would you interpret, this particular strategy document here vis-a-vis the Indian interest in the Indo-Pacific region? How does it align with our own policy here?
Well, Vishal, few points are continuation from the previous administrations. The whole free open Indo-Pacific, definitely that's something we subscribe to, and so do the other Quad members. And this is in essentially a contrast to the Belt and Road Initiative idea of the Chinese, because that is to establish hegemony. So I think it's like a counter-hegemonic coalition. And in this region, the United States is not seen as hegemonic except by the Chinese. So that's the difference. So I think we will align to the extent possible. Of course, a formal military alliance, like Elisabeth is saying, I mean, especially for India, we have lots of taboos about entering formal alliances. But short of that, this is a comprehensive strategic partnership, global strategic partnership with the US. And likewise, we have now 2+2 ministerial dialogues with Australia and with Japan as well, and with the US. 2+2 meaning both the foreign minister and the defense minister. So, which shows that there is a strong security angle to this and also a broader diplomatic one. So it's not only a military kind of formation, but we are looking at other things. For example, the other alignment point is the talk about creating democratic resilience. That's what the Quad members are saying, and Biden administration is pushing. What they mean is, in this region, there are a lot of countries where there is authoritarian rule. We are not going to challenge all of them, but where necessary and where, for example, the crisis in Myanmar right now, there's a lot of scope for Japan, India, Australia, and the US to come to join hands and to do something, not in the form of a overt military intervention, but creatively to try and stabilize the situation there.
Okay.
There are countries in the region which are democratic and big and important, like Indonesia. Indonesia is the leader of ASEAN. And we have been wanting the ASEAN countries, especially Indonesia, Vietnam, to buy into the Indo-Pacific idea. Because initially they were hesitant. But India also wants them to join hands, just like the US with the Indo-Pacific. Because without the ASEAN, that's a central block geographically and also in terms of the number of countries there. If they are not on board, then the Indo-Pacific idea may not fructify fully. It's not just the rim countries, which are coming in from at the heart of it is ASEAN.
Indeed.
We are saying ASEAN centrality. We are saying ASEAN outlook on Indo-Pacific. They have also issued one. They are a little tiptoeing around because they still are heavily dependent on China economically. And they're all part of the RCEP also, where China is there. But nonetheless, I think they are looking to diversify and to also make sure that what Elisabeth is talking about, the Chinese bullying of the small Southeast Asian countries over territorial and maritime rights.
Okay.
I mean, that's something they cannot abandon simply because China is their main trading partner. So there is a lot of geopolitical content here in the Indo-Pacific. And of course, they need trade benefits and privileges also. Japan has tried to maintain the Trans-Pacific Partnership, even though Trump administration departed from it. There is a TPP without the US with Japan. It's not a very robust kind of a trade pact, but that's something if the US can revisit and come back and we could be invited. Slowly we have been defensive on trade in India in the past, joining regional trade agreements. But if we can come in there, if we can support infrastructure growth, if we can promote democratic values in the region, if we can pair up with big countries like Indonesia, I think that's the way. That's where there's a lot of synergy, and that's if we can launch some joint projects. Right now, there are no joint projects, Vishal. I mean, the Quad is meeting, but how about choosing one or two countries where we implement something? Let's say a 5G network plan where all of us pool in resources and we can keep these countries free of the Huawei, shadow, which is lurking all over the region in the form of telecommunications, but which will actually increase the Chinese stranglehold over communications in the entire region, and will give them an advantage over us in negotiations. So I think Chinese espionage, Chinese bullying, these are real threats. Many countries realize it, but they are wondering who will be the balancer. And I think there is no single answer. United States alone cannot be a balancer. And I think Biden administration, better than Trump, realizes that. So that's why I think they want to shore this broader alliance or coalition. And that's where I think India is willing to play ball. We will join the summit of democracies that Biden wants to call. We will partner with them on infrastructure projects. I think the US, because of the domestic problems, not able to really play a forceful role in this region like it once used to. So I think they're looking more and more to delegate, or what we call offshore balancing, give more power to the regional powers. So I think that's where regional powers, ASEAN, India, we will matter a lot.
Let's understand more about what the United States can do here. Elisabeth, I'd like to bring you in here in terms of how United States of America needs to, balance this entire situation with the regional powers. As Dr. Chaulia was mentioning, it's not only about India, it's about other ASEAN nations here as well in this particular region, which we call Indo-Pacific. So what exactly, in your opinion, needs to be done by the Biden administration to, walk the talk here as well?
Yeah, so I think the almost paradoxical situation that we have is that he has a lot of opportunities here simply because his predecessor did so little, or rather did so much to damage America. And so Biden has a lot of goodwill, regardless of his own personality or of his own policies, simply because everybody, so many people and so many countries feel he's better than Trump. And so I think that means that a lot of countries will be willing to work with him or willing to work with the US simply because it's better than, or because they weren't even invited to work with the Trump administration. So in a sense, we could see this whole effort of building alliances, or even informal ones. We could see that turbocharged simply because there's been this sort of four-year desert, as it were, of international cooperation, or of meaningful international cooperation. And we should remember as well that Biden, he has seen this from the inside as 8 years as vice president under Obama. He saw all of this happening, and he's as a result quite aware and with a lot of expertise regarding China. So, but I think that the important thing to remember is that there are lessons that can be learned from history, and that is that if you work together, yes, your allies can be infuriating, they can be imperfect, but it's better to have allies than not to have allies, and that is the big advantage that the West has, and that we can use. The West as is in the not in the geographical sense, but in the sense of liberal democracy, is willing to work together, and I think this is where India will play a pivotal role. Where, for example, during the Cold War, obviously, it was between the alliances and maybe wasn't taken as seriously as a geopolitical player. Now it has a role, I think, like it has never had before as a geopolitical player.
Okay, indeed, there it is. Let's take a quick concluding comment from Dr. Chaulia here as well. Dr. Chaulia, would you agree with Elisabeth? They are saying that it's better to have allies, and that is something which the Biden administration seems to have realized, and that is reflecting in this policy document here as well. They want to work along, but the need here is for tangible results on the ground.
Yeah, I think the Chinese are quite confident. Xi Jinping says that the mega trend of our times is that the West is declining and the East, basically he means China, Sinocentric. He doesn't count India in it, that the East is rising. and that this is the time when the power transition, global power transition is going to happen. So I think we all have our tasks cut out. It's good to coordinate. It's good to have meetings. Summits are most welcome. And then the follow through. I think we should institutionalize Quad a little more. It's should be more than just an informal dialogue grouping. And we should expand it. We should invite some other member countries gradually to join it. Some of them will be hesitant because the fear of the backlash from the Chinese. But I can see if we make democracy the bedrock of this new coalition, then I think Indonesia, Philippines should be invited. Vietnam ideally should be there because of for geopolitical reasons, because Vietnam has always resisted Chinese hegemony in that region. But because it's a one-party state, there may be some issues with the Biden administration on that count. But I think they're being pretty realistic and realpolitik also. I mean, it's not, you cannot insist only on values all the time, because if you have to counter China, you'll need everybody. And in India, we also believe that even Russia should not be ostracized with sanctions and such things, because in the Eurasian region, Russia subtly plays a counterbalancing role to China. And they are also wary of Chinese influence and takeover in many of these former Soviet areas.
Okay.
And Russia is a big military partner for us too. So we are not going to abandon Russia either. We want them to be involved in the Indo-Pacific also. We have been trying to bring them back through the Vladivostok side, the far east of Russia, and to make them players in the naval sphere. Even the Europeans should be brought in. I think Biden, if he's patching up alliances with Europe, it's good for us, because Britain and France have already committed to play a somewhat limited but important military role in Indian Ocean region. They've got, some of them have territories here, Diego Garcia and Reunion Island and such places in the Indian Ocean region. So I think the EU wants to have a permanent naval presence in the Indo-Pacific. Okay. Along with the Americans. I mean, at least on paper, they are contemplating that. India will welcome that. We want to bring in more players, because nobody, frankly, let us be honest, nobody can challenge Xi Jinping's authoritarian and aggressive China on their own. So I think this is the right time for this kind of coordination. Okay. And the more, like you said, the more concrete, the proof of the pudding is in eating, as it says. So the Chinese should feel the heat. Ultimately, that is the whole idea, because otherwise, we can keep talking and keep chalking up plans, and they will continue to rise to a point where they become, unstoppable. And this whole region, they say the whole region is going to become a Chinese lake in the Indo-Pacific.
Okay, definitely all these meetings, plans, strategy documents have to result in concrete, actions being taken on the ground, tangible actions out there. If China, as the document says, has to be countered and seemingly is the central point out there for the Biden administration as well. Thank you so much, Ms. Elisabeth Braw and Dr. Sreeram Chaulia as well, for sharing your very important views with us and our viewers here on Rajya Sabha Television. That's all we have in this edition of Big Picture, where we spoke about what exactly is United States strategy with Indo-Pacific and how does it align with India's own interests. We'll come back again tomorrow with a different topic. Till then, keep watching Rajya Sabha Television. Thank you.